These are some examples of when an NBA bust saves their careers, starting off with Malik Monk. Now, the word bust in the sporting world carries a ton of weight. It can define a player's entire career and completely crush their spirit. For Malik Monk, who was selected 11th overall by the Charlotte Hornets in the 2017 draft, this narrative threatened to end his career prematurely. For someone who was compared to Lil Will in his draft comparisons, he had some shoes to fill, but it seemed like he had the potential to surpass that. As a freshman at Kentucky, he averaged nearly 20 a game and shot nearly 40% from three-point range. He was putting up performances that were clearly NBA level, like when he dropped 47 against the eventual champs, or 37 in an overtime dub against Georgia. Malik Monk had enormous scoring talent, with the ability to finish below or above the rim, while being what might have been the best shooter in the entire draft class. He was considered a top 10 prospect, and experts predicted him to go as early as 8th to the Knicks. However, he would fall a bit, but when the Hornets were able to get their hands on him with the 11th pick, they believed that they had scored their shooting guard of the future. But reality was much harsher than he would have hoped for in the pros. You would expect a rookie to flourish on a struggling team, but he didn't, and would ride the bench to average 6.7 points on 36% shooting from the field. Ouch. But that was just his first year. He'd get better, right? Well, through time he would get more clock, but his efficiency wasn't getting any better. In his third year with the team, he would average 10 points per game, but he was also shooting under 30% from 3. And after another just okay performance in his fourth year with the team, he was flying dangerously close to the bust label. Rather than turning into a Lil Will type of guy for Charlotte, he was just an undersized two-guard who couldn't stay efficient, while scoring was really all he was supposed to be doing at an NBA level. Fans who had seen him ball out in Kentucky just couldn't understand why he was struggling so much. In his 4 years with the Hornets, he averaged just 9 points, which was a far cry from what his ceiling was. His time had come to an end in Charlotte, and so he went to the Lakers, where he signed a 1-year minimum deal to play alongside the newly formed Russ, AD, and LeBron Big Three. But we all know how that went. Yet, this move would be the best thing that ever happened to Malik Monk. In a season riddled with drama in LA, Monk would put up his best season yet, and even work himself into a starting role for the first time in his career. He averaged 14 a game, shooting 47% from the field and 39% from deep. He had games that were reminiscent of his college self, even peaking with a 41-point performance to give the Lakers a win to bring an end to their disastrous 11th place season. This year was a pleasant surprise for the Lakers, and really for the whole league. It was a great thing to see. And he was able to work himself out of minimum deals where he signed on with the Kings for 2 years and $19 million that offseason. There, he embraced the role as a sixth man and a microwave scorer who could give the Kings some much-needed energy when he got into the game. He scored as much as 45. This was a key piece to the exciting Beam team, which pushed the Kings into the postseason for the first time in 16 years. And then the next season, he made his money's worth. Averaging 15 a game, Monk narrowly lost out on the Sixth Man of the Year award, but he lost to Naz Reid, so we can't really blame him. Despite that, Monk had found a home in Sacramento, and had seemingly brushed off the bust allegations, but he was marked as priority number 1 for the Kings in free agency, and they proved that he was when he signed on for $78 million over 4 years. This season he has only gotten better. In the absence of Fox, he has pushed himself into a starting role and is averaging career highs, including nearly 18 points and 6 assists per game. Monk is still young, and barring any trades or God forbid injuries, we could see him rise up and take even more responsibility within the Kings organization in the coming years. From a guy who couldn't take the lid off the hoop to a guy who seems to give fans a scoring clinic every time he grazes the floor, Malik Monk's had one crazy turnaround in his NBA career. From one former 11th overall pick to another, let's take a look at JJ Redick's playing career. As one of the purest, most efficient jump shooters we've seen in recent memory, but they tend to forget that his first couple of seasons really weren't too pretty. Like Malik Monk, Redick was an absolute beast in college, but to a way crazier extent. Playing 4 years for Duke and averaging as much as 28.9 points per game, on his way to the Player of the Year award in his senior season. But he also grew into one of the most hated players in the college scene. In fact, many people were preying on his downfall once he hit the league. JJ was a total asshole, as he could tell you. He was drinking and driving, he was talking shit on the floor, and coaches and teammates alike labeled him as an arrogant prick. His college career was storied, but really as a 6'4" on a good day spot-up shooter, he was destined to just be a role player in the NBA. He would end up coming into the league when he was selected 11th overall by the Orlando Magic in the 2006 NBA draft. But in his first few seasons, even through a realistic lens of what his ceiling was, JJ Redick was seriously disappointing. disappointing. He struggled to get consistent playing time. In his first 3 years in Orlando, he would average just 5.5 points in 14 minutes a game. Part of this was due to an injury, but that doesn't change the fact that Redick was turning into just another end-of-the-bench player. He wasn't getting the volume that he needed, and he struggled to fit into the NBA. He had gone from being at the spotlight of one of the most storied college basketball programs and the face of NCAA basketball to being labeled as a bust due to his inability to do anything other than shoot wide-open 3 balls. Year in and year out, he would put up similar numbers, but he slowly began to mold himself into a sixth-man kind of guy. He had already thrown away the idea that he could be a superstar, now he just needed to stay in the league. After 4 seasons with the Magic, he would sign a 3-year deal with the Bulls, but the Magic would match the offer, which meant that he would be stuck in Orlando for 3 more seasons. But Magic fans were growing impatient with their young guard and needed to see an improvement fast. I mean, it's easy to see why he was struggling. He's the size of a point guard, with the game revolving around his jump shot. He's not good at putting the ball on the floor and beating guys, not a great passer, and a slow-footed guy making him a pretty poor defender. There was not much of a role for him in the NBA, it seemed like. JJ Redick could have been out of the league very early into his career. After all, in the 2000s, you could count the number of 3-point specialists in the league on 2 hands. But due to a stretch of good luck, the system that seemed to be wasting away his career was the same one that completely revived it. Stan Van Gundy and the championship-run Orlando Magic put together a system that nowadays may seem typical, but back in the day was groundbreaking. As sort of a hybrid of the Steve Nash Suns and Hakeem Olajuwon Rockets, the Dwight Howard Magic were a pick-and-roll, transition, and post-dominated team. Dwight Howard was the best P&R target since Karl Malone, and even that you could debate while Dwight was at his peak. And Jameer Nelson really was just a passer and a guy who could shoot threes off the dribble. The point of this system was to use Dwight Howard as an inward magnet to pull defenders off the 3-point line, while the rest of the team was jam-packed with 3-point shooters. And for the past 4 years, the Magic had one of the best pure shooters in the league sitting at the end of their bench. JJ Redick was unlocked. He was a guy who would come off the bench and knock down a couple triples when he needed them the most. He was a spark plug, and by the end of his tenure with the Magic, he was playing over 30 minutes a game and was averaging around 15 points. There was something special about his play. As you can see with guys like Reggie Miller or Ray Allen before him, the best shooters in the world would do most of their work before they even catch the ball. As an off-ball roamer, JJ Redick could sniff out space anywhere on the floor. Watching this guy run off screens for a possession could teach you more about how to play off-ball than just about any film session could tell you. I mean, for this 6'3" 2-guard to be putting up 15 a game as like the 4th or 5th option was crazy. The best was yet to come for Redick. In the 2012-2013 season, he was traded to the Bucks, but that offseason, he would go to play for Doc Rivers and the Los Angeles Clippers, and became known for being an incredibly efficient shooter with Lob City alongside CP, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan. There he would find himself in a starting role, with Jamal Crawford coming off the bench, and would become the pinnacle of 3-point efficiency, shooting as high as 47.5% from behind the arc. His jump shot complemented Griffin and Paul's playstyles beautifully. I mean, he could have fit anywhere. He was one of those guys who didn't need CP to make a play for him, and despite having nowhere near the talent level, he was starting over Jamal Crawford just because there was no point in the game that having this guy wouldn't make your team better. 4 years of excellent play with the Clippers warranted a $23 million contract to go play with Joel Embiid in Philadelphia, and there he would find the same success even at his old age, averaging as much as 18 points per game. Perhaps the most impressive part of his career was not that he was able to overcome some early career struggles, but instead that he was able to stay in the league for 15 seasons playing at a high level for all of them, finishing his career with New Orleans and a very short stint in Dallas. His career was an excellent reminder that many careers don't follow a linear path, from getting branded as a disappointing player or even a bust to becoming the archetype for a pure 3-point specialist. JJ Redick was able to reinvent himself to the point where people forget just how mediocre his first few seasons were. Tyson Chandler was the 2nd overall pick in the 2001 draft straight out of high school. His strength and athleticism were NBA ready, no doubt about it. It was what NBA teams loved about him, and would draw comparisons to guys like Rasheed Wallace. He was a raw talent, and so, when the Bulls traded away the former #1 pick Elton Brand to the Clippers for the rights to Tyson Chandler, they weren't planning on letting him go. In his rookie season, he would average 6 and 5, and it would become apparent that Tyson Chandler was more of a project than Chicago was ready for. In the next season, he would improve a bit, averaging 9 and 7, but in comparison to Elton Brand, who had become a 20 and 10 machine to start off his career as one of the most consistent bigs in the league, Chandler was a bit disappointing to say the least, and whispers of bust began circulating around the league. And the next season, we wouldn't even get to see much of him, after he suffered a pair of injuries that left him sidelined for the majority of the season. The next 2 years, he could stay healthy, but after averaging 5 and 9 in his 5th year with the team, the Bulls' patience had completely run out, and they traded him away to New Orleans for J.R. Smith and P.J. Brown. It was humbling for a guy that was just the 2nd overall pick pick. Straight out of high school, people expected great things, but once he touched down in New Orleans, he started showing off the potential that teams saw before he entered the league. Playing alongside point guard Chris Paul, Chandler became a lob threat and defensive anchor. He focused on what he did best, really, and because of that, he was becoming more efficient and was becoming an actual asset and an actual NBA player. In his first year in New Orleans, he averaged 9 and 12 with almost 2 blocks, while shooting over 60% from the field. He was dominant at what he was best at. The next season, he would average a double-double and was clearly on the upswing, and created an elite frontcourt duo with David West on a team that won 56 games, really complementing what David West was weak at. He would then be moved to Charlotte, which would just be a quick detour before he joined the Mavericks, where he would win a championship alongside Dirk Nowitzki on their historic championship run. But Dallas would be just a detour as well, as he would be moved to the Knicks in a sign-and-trade deal that offseason. And that is where his journey from being labeled as a bust to becoming a cornerstone center was completed. During his first season with the team, he averaged 11 and 10, but was able to win the Defensive Player of the Year award and get awarded to the All-NBA third team, all while boasting career-high offensive efficiency. Tyson Chandler was more than just a rim protector or post defender. This guy was a mastermind that quarterbacked the defense, that to his last day was the guy calling out screens, making the right reads, and elevating the entire team in the meantime. This is the kind of guy that makes you excited to play or watch defense and turns defenders into a full-on defensive system. He had finally figured out what he needed to do in order to be successful. Although he never turned out to be a superstar, he really proved to be a star in his role to a level that no one could deny. Chauncey Billups was known for his integral role with the Pistons in the 2000s, but it took years and years of progress to get there. When the Boston Celtics selected Billups with the 3rd overall pick in the 97 draft, they envisioned him as their point guard of the future. But just 51 games into his rookie season, he would be traded. It was unheard of to be traded after such a high selection, but Rick Pitino must have wanted immediate success, and that was not found with Chauncey. He would end up in Toronto for the remaining games and give them similar results. By the end of his rookie season, he had put up 11 a game, which clearly wasn't enough for Toronto either, as they traded Billups that offseason to Billups' hometown team, the Denver Nuggets. And after one season there, which showed slight improvement, he would miss nearly an entire season due to injury. By then, Billups was widely considered a bust by NBA fans. He would sign with Minnesota that offseason to be a backup point guard for less than his rookie contract was worth, which showed that they didn't expect him to be the next big thing or anything of the sort. And in short, he wasn't. Once again, he was putting up performances that put his career in the category of mediocrity. He was bouncing from team to team, and his erratic shot selection made it difficult for a team to prioritize him. So when free agency came calling once again, he took his talents to Detroit on a 5-year, $35 million contract. And there, he finally started turning himself around. Surrounded by teammates like Ben Wallace and Rip Hamilton, Billups was able to grab hold of a starting job and never let go of it, each season under Hall of Fame coach Larry Brown. The culmination of his transformation took place in 2004 when the Pistons were able to win the whole damn thing. The team was special. They were the epitome of team basketball, and they didn't need a superstar to do it. Ben Wallace held down the paint while the rest of the team backed him up with elite perimeter defense that held their opponents to an average of just 84 points per game in the regular season. They dismantled the Lakers team in the finals, holding them to as little as 68 points that series, with their floor general Chauncey Billups playing his way to a finals MVP award. By then, it was already settled that Billups was there to stay. He went from barely cracking 10 points a game to being up near 20. The next season, the Pistons would fall in 7 to the Spurs in the finals, but beating a prime Tim Duncan and Coach Pop back then was damn near impossible. Surprisingly though, Billups' first nod would come in the year after those 2 finals appearances, but that comes to show just how little that team cared about individual basketball. He would proceed to make 4 straight All-Star games, 3rd team All-NBA twice, and 2nd once. He would be able to play for his hometown Denver Nuggets for a couple more years before bouncing around the league and finishing his career in Detroit once again. I mean, really, Billups is just remembered as the ultimate leader and ultimate winner. He was a fantastic facilitator that could do the little things that your team needed to do. It really was the glue guy to one of the most special teams in basketball history. It really was a long way from the guy who was thought to be an NBA bust 6 years into his career. Andrew Wiggins is another player that many people were disappointed in when he first entered the NBA. Coming out of the University of Kansas alongside fellow star Joel Embiid, Wiggins was widely considered as the consensus #1 pick, and after winning the lottery, the Cleveland Cavaliers pulled the trigger on Andrew Wiggins. But before his rookie season, he would be sent to Minnesota for Kevin Love, and that's where his career began. He started off by averaging 17 a game, which was enough to win the Rookie of the Year award in a pretty weak rookie class, at least to start. And T-Wolves fans were looking at who they thought was going to be their guy. In the following seasons, Wiggins would progress as expected, averaging as much as 23.6 points per game. But after he was forced to share the wealth with Jimmy Butler, his production took a bit of a dive. Additionally, the team was struggling. The T-Wolves would only get to the playoffs once in Wiggins' tenure, but they would be bounced quickly in the first round. In 2017, Timberwolves would sign Wiggins to a max extension, and questions began to circulate. Was Wiggins truly the player the Timberwolves hoped he would be, or was he putting up empty stats on a struggling team? The bust label may be a little bit harsh for somebody who's averaging up near 24 a game in his third season, but when you aren't taking your team anywhere, then you can certainly start thinking about it. People said that Minnesota was practically forced into signing him to the max, and that they would be regretting it very soon after. And well, it looks like they were, because halfway through the 2019-2020 season, they shipped him a protected first and a second to Golden State just to land D'Angelo Russell. I mean, they had to get rid of him. This was a salary dump. Minnesota didn't want to pay the price, so they found a team that would find more value in Wiggins. Really, up to this point, he was a scorer with all of the talent in the world. He could jump through the gym, and he had the base skill set to really develop into one of the most elite scorers that the game has ever seen. I mean, just go look back at his high school mixtape, and you can understand why people were calling him Maple Jordan. Really, in Minnesota, it seemed like he didn't want to reach his ceiling. He was a non-willing passer, he had bad shot selection, and he put in no effort on defense despite being one of the most athletic people in the NBA. But in Steve Kerr and the Warriors system, Wiggins found a role. He was in a winning organization for once, and he didn't need to be the franchise star or the primary scorer. Additionally, with Steph Curry leading the way, the pressure that Minnesota fans had put on Wiggins had dissolved. With the Warriors, he was scoring much more efficiently, and was even voted as an all-star starter while being the fourth leading scorer on the team. You can argue about whether or not the all-star appearance was warranted or not, but one thing became clear. The mood about Wiggins had changed drastically. Later that season, Golden State, after seemingly having moved on from their dynasty, won the damn championship, with Wiggins in a key role. He was able to complement the core of Golden State perfectly. For a team who loved to play small ball, Wiggins was pivotal. His length and size made him a defensive asset, and he really wasn't the selfish player he was on offense just a few years ago either. His ability to play his role and play it well proved to be the key to turning his career from bust-worthy to successful. His statistical production declined in Golden State, but because he was more efficient and because he was winning, that didn't matter. He filled the holes in his game. He found a place where he could thrive and be the player that he needed to be. Sadly, he would be shipped off to Miami, as many of you know, in return for Jimmy Butler. But he left on good terms, thanking the fans and the organization for all that they did for him. Now the question comes about whether Wiggins will thrive in Miami or not. With the world of opportunity and Coach Spo pulling the strings, don't be surprised if you see a second resurgence of Andrew Wiggins. Aaron Gordon is another player from that 2014 draft that has made a name for himself in recent years. Compared to guys like Kenneth Faried or Sean Marion, Gordon was expected to be a two-way threat immediately in the NBA. Obviously, every player picked in the top 5 is not going to be a superstar, but after he was selected by the Orlando Magic with the 4th overall pick, he got off to quite the slow start. To be fair, he was sidelined a bit with a foot fracture, but when he did play, he was nowhere near a threat to other teams. He averaged 5-3 in his rookie season while shooting an abysmal 27% from deep. The next season, he would see higher averages, but he still had quite a bit of work to do. In fact, the defining moment of his career up to that point came when he was able to come in second in the 2016 dunk contest in an all-time showdown between him and Zach LaVine. But hey, that was pretty sweet after all. But becoming known purely for the dunk contest is definitely not what players purely hope for. I mean, ask McClung if he'd trade away his dunk contest wins for a solid spot in the league, and I'm sure he'd do that in a heartbeat. Additionally, as Wiggins had, Gordon struggled to find success in Orlando, making the playoffs just twice, playing in only one of them in his time with Orlando was unacceptable to him. But as a player, he was also not really developing well at all. Gordon's archetype is a bit unique. He's a 6'8" hyper-athletic power forward who was forced to create his own shots a lot of the time, but that really just wasn't his role that he was going to thrive in, and he realized that. So after 6.5 years in the organization, Gordon demanded a trade, and the Magic compiled, sending him to Denver in 2021. And there he transferred himself in a way almost identical to Andrew Wiggins. His averages went down, but he went from shooting 12 shots a game on 43% shooting to 8 a game on 50% shooting immediately. I mean, being able to put him in a typical rim running position instead of a shot creating small forward transformed his game entirely. It's not like the guy was bad, it's a couple guys pulling the strings that don't know how to utilize their talents. The next season, when his volume grew to near Orlando levels once again, he was still efficient as hell, averaging 15 on 52% shooting. The clarity of his role helped him skyrocket to new levels. Picking up meaningful minutes, Gordon was an integral piece of the 2023 Denver Nuggets finals run. Making the jump from high school to college and then college to the NBA is difficult. Most, if not all, of the guys playing with you were the number one option at lower levels, so it can get tricky to learn the niche role you need to play to remain successful. Some guys will be able to do it all throughout their career, but more often than not, that isn't the case, like for Gordon. He has stated that he's willing to do whatever it takes to ensure Denver's success and is going to have a team-first approach, which is very clear to see, and has earned him the max extension he signed in the past offseason. As many players have, Gordon struggled with finding the role that suited him best. Now that he's found that role, he's been invaluable, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he is a key contributor to some more Nuggets playoff runs in the near future. Shaun Livingston's career path was also quite unusual. Livingston was a guy that passed up college and went straight to the NBA and was seen as a valuable prospect for many reasons, but his raw scoring and passing ability, while standing at 6'7", puts it into perspective. He was committed to play at Duke originally, but as the 04 draft class came closing in, it became clear that he wanted to just go straight to the pros. The question about him wasn't whether he would be drafted and wanted by teams, but how early a team would take a chance on him. And when he was drafted 4th overall by the Los Angeles Clippers, it was clear that these guys were bought in. He was an exciting player, but unfortunately, Clippers fans wouldn't get to see much of him, as he would miss a significant portion in each of his first 3 seasons. However, an injury in his 3rd season would nearly end him. In February of 2007, Livingston would come down awkwardly after a layup and pretty much blow up his entire knee. He tore his ACL, PCL, MCL, meniscus, and dislocated his patella. It was an injury that made fans all over the world wince. I mean, no one wants to see a player go down with an injury, especially one that bad. He said that doctors compared it to a car crash, and that they had even put amputation on the table at one point. Professionals wondered if he would ever step foot on the basketball court again. It was heartbreaking. He was just 21 years old and his career was at great risk. He would have the surgeries, he would do rehab, he would basically have his entire knee reconstructed. But after a ton of hard work, he would finally be cleared to play. 16 months after the injury, the Clippers did not give him the qualifying offer required to keep him from becoming an unrestricted free agent. But who would blame them? Paying Livingston $5.8 million would basically be like gambling money away. So instead, Livingston signed with the Heat, but would only get 4 games in before being traded to the Grizzlies, who would waive him on that same day. It was then that Livingston had to resort to signing with the Tulsa 66ers, the D team for the OKC Thunder. He would work his way into a few games both that season and the next, but he would be waived by the Thunder as well. The next team on his journey was the Washington Wizards, who signed him to a couple of 10-day contracts before signing him on for the rest of the season. This was far from what Shaun had expected when he first came in the league. He was a bust, not in the way that most people think. The typical bust is a player who struggles to produce, of course, at the next level, but you can't really blame Shaun Livingston for what happened to him. It was completely out of his control, and it was one of the most gruesome things that the league has ever seen. But after his year with Washington, he would catch a break when he was signed on with Charlotte for 2 years and $7 million. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He would spend the next 4 years with 5 different teams before he signed a 3-year, $16 million deal with the Golden State Warriors, where he would be utilized as an efficient backup point guard that Steve Kerr could call upon. He was a mid-range specialist. It was actually insane. This guy basically didn't ever miss. He was a respected veteran presence with the team throughout the 5 years he was there. He was consistent and gave the Warriors what they needed, and was someone that could hold down the fort when Steph was out, or at least take some of the focus off of him. Making it to 5 straight finals and winning 3 of them is something that most NBA players can only dream of, but thanks to the Warriors and the role that they put him in, he was able to contribute to that before retiring in 2019 after 14 years of playing. For someone who's almost completely out of the league due to injury at 21, getting to play for over a decade is much more than a blessing. After winning the National Player of the Year in 1996, Marcus Camby came into the NBA scene with high expectations all around him, and after being selected with the 2nd overall pick in the infamous 1996 draft by the Toronto Raptors, things were at an all-time high. He was picked after Allen Iverson and before Hall of Famers like Kobe Bryant, Ray Allen, and Steve Nash. So looking back at it, expectations sure should have been high. In his first 2 seasons, he would show off that he could be a threat, averaging 15 and 6 in his rookie season, and leading the league in blocks in his 2nd year while averaging 12 and 7. But after just 2 years with the team, he would be shipped off to New York in return for longtime Knick Charles Oakley, where he would serve as a backup for Patrick Ewing. It was not something that Camby expected, and he admitted that he was in shock when it happens, but it was something that he would just have to take on the chin. There would be a couple of defined reasons for the trade. First off, Camby had some injury issues that were too big to overlook for Toronto, but also, the Raptors front office was figuring things out. Some people have gone so far to call the front office of that era incompetent, but you can be the judge of that. Charles Oakley would spend 3 mediocre, and I mean very mediocre years in Toronto after they gave up Camby. Meanwhile, Camby would be progressing behind Hall of Famer Patrick Ewing. While it meant riding the bench for a little while, it was probably what Camby needed, because when he he was finally able to get his hands on a starting role there, his production was far better than his days in Toronto. In his third year with New York, Camby was able to average a double-double, but there were still some durability questions as he would play in just 29 games in the next one. But at least he was somewhat finding his groove. In the 2002 offseason, Camby would be moved to Denver, and that's really where he began to grow into his own. He became an elite defensive big once he got comfortable, and even though he never once made an all-star appearance, he certainly could have been. He led the league in blocks in back-to-back seasons, and he realized that he didn't need to be the guy to put up 20 a night when he had a young Carmelo Anthony and company to do that for him. Rather than scoring a bunch of points, if he could keep his opponents from doing that, it was a win in his book. He was becoming more and more of a beast on the glass as time went on too. In fact, to this day, he stands with Dennis Rodman as one of the two guys to have multiple 0-point, 20-plus rebound performances. The peak of his career came in the 06-07 season when he was able to win the Defensive Player of the Year award while also averaging 11 points and 12 rebounds a game. I mean, it was glaringly obvious in the defensive stats when Camby wasn't in the game, and his win shares tell you that story. The next season, he came awfully close to winning the award again, coming in second to Kevin Garnett. His role was to clean up his teammates' messes and tighten up the defense, and he was a big reason for the consistent success that the Nuggets found when he was on the roster. By the time he was traded away from Denver, he was already 33 years old. Despite his age, he was still able to keep up his reputation as a glue guy until the very end, hopping around 4 more teams in his final 5 seasons. Like many others on the list, Camby's story shows that the purpose of a high lottery pick is not for them to become a superstar that can lead teams to titles, but that instead, all it takes is to find a role and play it well, because believe it or not, that's all it takes to put together a 17-year career. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. We're trying to hit 100K this year, and as always, I'll see you boys in the next one. Peace out.